Alright, good evening. My name is Lynne Torgerson. I'm going to try and speak up here a little bit. And I'm running for Minnesota Attorney General. I want to thank Mr. Adam Davis for inviting me. Thank you for doing that. It's a privilege and honor to be here. And I also want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. And thank you for your activism. We really need that in this next election cycle. As I mentioned, my name is Lynne Torgerson. I'm running for Minnesota Attorney General. Three important things to me that I like to mention. One, I'm a Christian. Two, I'm a patriot. Three, I'm a Trump supporter. I'd like to go a little bit over my background, tell you a little bit about my campaign, and also tell you what I'd like to do as Attorney General. As far as my background, I own a home in Minneapolis. I grew up in a western suburb. I attended the University of Minnesota and got degrees in political science and psychology. After that, I attended William College of Law. And then about 25 years ago, I opened my own successful practice in downtown Minneapolis, which I have to the present day. I had a court date this morning at 9:30. So, what I do in my law practice, I primarily practice Second Amendment gun rights litigation, expungements, and historically I did more criminal defense work. For the Second Amendment enthusiasts, I always like to mention some facts. I think facts can kind of tell a story. I have won gun rights cases in 36 different counties in the state of Minnesota, as well as at the Minnesota Court of Appeals. About a month ago, or last month, I did file a petition with the U.S. Supreme Court. We're seeking to strike down the carry permit requirement statute in the state of Minnesota on the grounds that it punishes pure Second Amendment behavior as a gross misdemeanor or felony level if you don't have a permit, and about 5 million Minnesotans do not have a permit to carry. For the Israel enthusiasts, I think it's important to note I was Minneapolis City Director for Christians United for Israel for 5 years. At our own expense, we would travel to D.C. and lobby Congress on behalf of Israel. A little bit about my campaign. As I was putting together my campaign, I realized that an overarching theme was freedom. Medical freedom, freedom to go to work, things like that. And I always like to mention the big three that we would like to be free of, and that's Governor Walz, Pete Ellison, and President Joe Biden. When I started running, somebody told me to take a look at the powers of the Attorney General's office. And it was kind of surprising to me, and I like to mention them to people because this is what we can do when we get elected to this office. And it's a case that was issued when my action was Attorney General. I don't agree with his principles, but I really like the way he ran the office. He used the office of the Attorney General as a sword. And one of the cases essentially set forth, and I'll quote it, it says, as Chief Law Officer of the state, the Attorney General possesses all the powers inherent in that office of common law. The Attorney General may institute, conduct, and maintain all such actions and proceedings as he deems necessary for the enforcement of the laws of the state, the preservation of order, and the protection of legal rights. That is extremely broad power. The case went on to state that the Attorney General may appear for the state in all civil cases in the state courts whenever, in the Attorney General's opinion, the interests of the state require it. So, pretty much, when you get elected, you can pretty much institute any sort of case that we want, that we deem in the interests of the state. So, as Attorney General, I would want to protect a number of things. I would just like to mention, since March of 2020, I've been opposing the lockdowns of the businesses, lockdowns of schools, things like that. I think it's really important to note that before this, before a government could shut down a business, they were required to pay the owner of that business the fair market value of that business. And Waltz and Ellison is completely disregarded those constitutional requirements. I do think we need to address the businesses that have been harmed by these lockdown orders. The policies have addressed everybody but the business owners. As Attorney General, I would also want to bring lawsuits to strike down the legislation which enabled Governor Waltz to issue these sort of lockdown decrees. It can be struck down as unconstitutional, unnecessary, unauthorized, and destructive. And I do think it's important to note that these sort of lockdown orders are unprecedented ever, and they're probably the most destructive acts of our own government against our own citizens, in my memory. So, and I've also always opposed the mandatory vaccines, the mandatory masking, and I also want to enable doctors to determine the health care that people need for COVID, not Dr. Fauci. I also, as I mentioned, a huge supporter of Second Amendment rights, and I always want to take the opportunity, some of the younger generations aren't aware of the importance of Second Amendment rights, as illustrated by Justice Scalia. He said there's three primary reasons for the Second Amendment. The first is so that we have the ability to engage in self-defense, property, family, things like that. Second is so that we have citizens armed on the ground who can aid the military in the event of an attack against the United States, domestic or foreign. And third, so that we have the ability to defend ourselves against governmental tyranny. So, ordinarily, people talk about a few issues. I think, the left has been so advancing on so many different arenas that, I briefly want to touch on those. I do think it's important to reopen the pipelines. Gas has doubled, at least filling up my tank in the past year. We need to support the police, not sue the police. We need to require enforcement of the criminal laws. Stop the rioting. Don't let them burn down police stations. Stop illegal immigration. Support pro-life. Promote racial harmony and stop CRT. Investigate the voting machines. Support perhaps paper ballots and one-day voting. And then I also want to just briefly address a lot of people. I do want to educate people on problems with Keith Ellison. There's a lot of people who are afraid to touch this topic. There's an organization, the Council on American Islamic Relations, who's active in every state in their union. They were a named, unindicted co-conspirator to funding terrorism in the Holy Land Foundation trial, and there were convictions in that case for sending $11 million to the terrorist organization Hamas. And then we have a YouTube video with Keith Ellison being a speaker at a care banquet. So he's definitely tied to people he should not be, and needs to be removed from government permanently. So overall, I just want to mention that, a huge theme of my approach is that I want to protect the founding principles of our country, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the foundations of our republic. And I really like the quote, living in Minneapolis, I guess I kind of feel like a minority, but by I think it's Samuel Adams. It says, it does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. So, there's a lot of work, I think, for conservatives and Republicans to do. You know, we've been losing at about a rate of about 25-1 for a number of years. So that I think that just means that we need to work 1,000 times harder. I would say that I'm up for the battle and I get things done. And so please support Lynne Torgerson for Minnesota Attorney General. Okay.
What prompted you to run for office?
I guess, you know, I feel qualified to handle the job. I think mainly just I'm willing and able. So, you know, I care about the country. I believe in the foundations, you know, of America and America First. I think attitude. So, those reasons.
Excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.